So one of the questions I always get asked is, what is the best negotiation strategy? You're getting ready for a big negotiation at work and you want some advice on how to approach it. My name is Bob Bordone, and I'm a senior fellow at Harvard Law School, where I founded and directed the law school's negotiation and mediation clinical program. So in this video, you'll learn what is the best negotiation strategy, and importantly, I'll take you through a step-by-step approach. So at the end, you'll be an expert on how to prepare for and enact that best negotiation strategy.
Exactly.
You know, there's tons of advice available on the internet, and there's countless books on how to prepare. But how do you make sense of it all? So I've written about and taught and consulted on negotiation for more than 2 decades. And my work expands all sorts of contexts, from car salesman to international peace to pharmaceutical sales. So what I want to give you here is the best advice in a condensed and useful way. When we talk about negotiation strategy, we're talking about a thoughtful and planful approach that will help you get the best possible outcome for yourself and for others, and that will help you actually build relationships along the way.
Yeah, I should say so.
So here are some strategy lessons. First, ask, who are the stakeholders? Too frequently, we only focus on the particular person with whom you're negotiating. Maybe it's your boss or a customer or a child or a parent, and of course that person is important. But in establishing a negotiation strategy, I want to think much more broadly than that. I want to think not just the parties at the table, but also a broader set of stakeholders, right? Those people who are influenced by the stakeholders and who the stakeholders listen to. That is, who influence those decision makers at the table. Second, once I identify the stakeholders, I want to write out all of the issues to be negotiated. So if it's a typical buy-sell negotiation, I might write something like the price point or the quantity or the warranties or delivery dates. Then, once I have the issues, I want to write out all of my interests with respect to each issue, and I want to prioritize what are the most important of these. I then want to do the same for each of the stakeholders I identify. Once I've done this, I'm moving to the third step, which is really cultivating creativity. I'm going to say a little bit more about that in a moment.
Okay.
The fourth step is doing research, benchmarking, learning as much as you can about industry practice, about other deals in the industry, about common norms. Now, sometimes that kind of information is available on the internet, and sometimes you have to do more homework. Other times, it might mean picking up the phone or talking to a colleague or others in your industry. Let me give you an example. Lots of times, I'm coaching an executive getting ready for a negotiation on their compensation package. And so what I encourage them to do is spend some time reaching out to colleagues who might be similarly situated to get their counsel and advice. Now, you might be thinking, like, I can't ask people what their salary is. That's just rude.
I think you're kind of rude.
And you're right, that is kind of rude. But you can ask people about how they negotiated, about what they negotiated, about how they thought about the negotiation. And when you do that, you'll learn all sorts of things you didn't expect. Like you might learn that they negotiated perks that you never even thought of. Some people actually also reveal their salary. And you know who's most likely to reveal their salary? The people who got a really good deal, because they like to brag.
But I'm only doing this because you called me rude.
And that is great for you, because when you're benchmarking, you want to be able to use ambitious benchmarks. I can tell you so many examples in which this has made a really big difference, but I'll give you one live one. So this was a few years ago. I was coaching someone who'd been recruited to head the surgery department in a major hospital. At first, she resisted my advice on doing this kind of outreach. She was like, I don't know, this feels rude and kind of gauche. And I was like, you know what, listen, it's up to you. I mean, you're paying me to coach you, and I can't guarantee this will work. I could just tell you, I've seen it work in the past. So without getting into a lot of the specific details, let's just say that in the end, she was persuaded to reach out to colleagues at different hospitals and learn about comparative deals. In the end, she added more than $250,000 to her starting salary, plus research budgets and budgets for new staff that she wouldn't have had she not done this benchmarking. I walked away thinking, man, I need to raise my hourly fee for all the value I added there.
I'd argue that moment happens daily.
So, in addition to doing this kind of homework, you also want to do homework about the person you're going to be negotiating with on the other side. So, what is their reputation? How do you build rapport with them? What are the kinds of moves that they make that can knock you off balance? What kind of arguments do they often use? The more you learn about them, the more you understand their thinking, the better positioned you're going to be effective in that negotiation.
You're going to be so involved in their lives.
One of the things I always say in teaching negotiation, and this is a mistake people make all the time, right? They come up with arguments that a reasonable person might think, or that the average person might think, or that they would find persuasive if they were in the other person's shoes. And that's just a misunderstanding of negotiation. If you are arguing before a jury, you come up with arguments that the reasonable or average person might come up with. But if you're negotiating, I frankly don't care what a reasonable person thinks about. What I care about is, what does this particular person that I am trying to influence think? That's all that matters. What is persuasive to them? So the more I understand their world and their levers, the better it is for me.
Are you serious?
So let me share an example of this in my own negotiation experience. Some years ago, I was working in a context with a very competitive supervisor. And as I asked about what influenced her, I learned that it was really unrelated to many of the issues that would have persuaded me if I were her. Instead, she reacted most favorably to arguments that demonstrated how my ask from our organization made our organization more competitive with our competitors.
You told me to keep it a secret, and that's exactly what I did, even from myself.
And so what I learned is, don't frame arguments about what would be better for our particular institution. Instead, frame arguments on how it would knock off our competition. And that was an extremely effective way to get the kinds of things I wanted for my program.
So why don't we just put everything back exactly as it was and start again?
Okay, you do all of this work not for the purpose of writing a script, because negotiation is not like writing a script. Negotiation requires preparation, but it also requires improv. So you want to be super knowledgeable and incredibly prepared, precisely so that you can riff once you're in the game. So for those of you who know about music, right, this is a lot like jazz. Really great jazz musicians know a ton about the theory of music, and they know how to perform pieces, but when they're performing, they're totally doing improv. So now that you've considered your interests and theirs, you've done your benchmarking, I want to get back to that creative piece that I was talking about earlier, because negotiators tend to focus too much of their energy just on how to get a bigger share of the negotiation pie and to get not taken advantage of. And of course, those things are really important. But what they miss is those opportunities that are in negotiation to be creative and expand the size of a negotiation pie before dividing it. So once I have the list of interests, mine, the other side's, the other stakeholders, I'd say get a friend or two of yours in the room and together spend time brainstorming what are the ways that you can meet all these people's interests in creative ways without just dividing or splitting the pie. During this period, don't get evaluative. You're not going to use everything on your list. Just be as creative as you possibly can. So there'll be ideas that you'll never use, but they can spark some ideas that you really will use. Last thing in terms of a negotiation strategy is coming up with a backup plan. So that is to say, really thinking about, if I don't reach a deal here, what are the things I'll do without an agreement of the other side? And if the things you come up with aren't really great, then you should spend some time improving your away from the table alternative before you go into the negotiation. Why? Because at the end of the day, we only want to say yes to something that is being offered to us that is better than what we would do without a negotiation.
Yeah, well, now I know, but it's weird because they're still saying it.
If you are not prepped, if you do not know what you'll do absent a negotiation, you will get stuck in a sunk cost problem. That is, you'll say, oh, I've spent so much time and energy on this negotiation, I really need to say yes, and you end up saying yes to something that actually isn't as good as what you do without a deal. Okay, so now we've done all this strategy work in advance. Now we're going into the room. What do I do then?
You know, I've been wondering that myself.
So what I always say to anyone going into a negotiation is that this is your opportunity to lead and not follow. If you go into that negotiation and it quickly becomes a kind of offer, counter offer approach, this is not going to work for you. All your negotiation prep is going to be for naught. So instead, I want to go in there and say to the other side, let's not trade offers. What I really want to understand is what's important to you and why. And then I want to spend some time talking about what's important to me and why. So I'm really replicating my prep in the room with the other side. Then I'm going to say to the other side, now I want to spend some time brainstorming some creative things that we can do to advance these interests. And then what I want to do is look at that list of things and use some of the benchmarking work that I have done earlier to pick the best ones, and then we'll make some commitments.
Excited beyond compare.
Now, most of the time, the other side is going to be like, what are you talking about? Like, here's my offer. Like, react to this. You have to avoid getting into their game. So if they start giving you an offer or a counter offer, just say, that's really nice of you. Like, I wonder if you're willing to actually do this slightly differently. Unless the other side is really untrusting of you, they'll probably give it a shot. And the more I can get them playing this approach, the better it's going to be both for me and for them.
It appears someone has something to celebrate.
One more piece in terms of the best negotiation strategy, and that's the strategic use of active listening. So contrary to popular assumption, the most skillful negotiators spend much more time listening to the other side and asking really good open-ended questions than they do making arguments. So I'm going to share with you a story from the 2020 presidential cycle. I know a lot of people are really, really exhausted about hearing about this election cycle, but it's not a story of the last two candidates standing, Biden and Trump, but actually it involves Pete Buttigieg, who is currently the transportation secretary. And when he was running for president, there appeared a column in an online newspaper called The Root. And the headline of this article said, Pete Buttigieg is a lying MF. Now, let me just say, if you're Pete Buttigieg and you're running for president, this is not the kind of media you want. What's worse is that this article went viral on social media. Now, there are any number of ways this campaign could have responded, right? You could ignore this article. You could send in your media team with a line-by-line response. Pete Buttigieg didn't do either of these. And what ends up happening the very next day is the very same op-ed author in the very same newspaper writes an op-ed, and the op-ed says the following. It says he got a call from Pete Buttigieg. And to be clear, wasn't an aide who made the call, wasn't the media team who made the call, it was Pete Buttigieg. And the article goes on to say that Pete Buttigieg, in this call, did not make a counter-argument, did not defend himself, did not refute the other day's nasty op-ed. Instead, it says he listened. And it actually specifically says he listened for 18 minutes and 45 seconds.
And I'm very much looking forward to the moment when that stops.
Now, at the end of this second op-ed, the op-ed writer does not throw his support behind Pete Buttigieg's campaign. No. However, he does say Pete Buttigieg is a decent and honorable person and someone who could be dealt with and someone who is a good guy. Now, I gotta tell you, to go from a lying MF to an all-around good guy in a span of 24 hours, thanks to 18 minutes and 45 seconds of listening, if that's not an endorsement of listening as a persuasion tool, I don't know what is. And you don't need to like Pete Buttigieg one bit to take the lesson here. In negotiation, whenever you're ready to make a counter-argument, just to resist that urge and practice active listening. I'm going to speak more about active listening in future videos. And if you want to learn more about how to prepare for negotiation, how to execute negotiation strategy, keep on watching the next video. Check it out now.